Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to be doing my review, or it's probably more of a spoiler-free discussion about Gardens of the Moon, the first book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series by Steven Erikson. This is a series that I have been very nervous about starting for a long time. Funnily enough, my husband and I have owned random books in this series for years, decades. And have no idea how book 7 of Malazan ended up on our bookshelf. But you know what? I thought that after being on BookTube, seeing all of my friends really enjoy this series, that I wanted to finally get around to starting it. And for at least this first book, I'm going to make this, like I said, more of a should you read, what was my experience reading it, and what did I enjoy about the series, rather than a full review. I think as I move forward with the series, I will probably transition into spoiler reviews, because I think that I will want to discuss my thoughts, to have that cathartic experience of getting all of these things out, because I have heard that the series just gets even more complex and enjoyable from here. So I think that moving forward, I will want to have that experience. But for now, I think that this can be a helpful video for people like me who have had Malazan on their radar for a really long time, but were unsure if it was going to be the series for them. I think one of the main reasons, so beyond being a lengthy series, Malazan is 10 books if you just count the main series and not any of the side series, prequels, sequels, whatever. 10 books is like a fairly lengthy fantasy series, not the longest by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a commitment. And when you think about the fact that all of the books get progressively longer and that they are known to be dense compared to some other mainstream fantasy, it can be intimidating to start this series. So I think that's one of the things that held me back. But to be perfectly honest, I think one of the things that held me back from reading this the most is that I was never fully convinced about whether people loved Malazan because of the enjoyment, because it was just a reading experience that they treasured, or if they loved it because they loved the feeling of reading something that they knew was complicated. And I say that with absolutely no ire. I say that with absolutely no judgment. We all like feeling accomplished. I mean, I like feeling accomplished. I imagine that many people like feeling accomplished. And when you read fantasy fiction, a lot of people talk about reading it for the escape. It has taken a long time for the literary community to accept that fantasy has literary merit. That is not the point of this video. I absolutely think that fantasy has literary merit, and I do not think that it needs to be Malazan to have literary merit. But I think that there is something attractive to that concept of reading a series that makes you feel like you're putting a little bit of work in. Like, this is enjoyable, and I like the characters, and I like where the story is going, but I also like that it makes me feel smart, for lack of a better word. And I was skeptical about whether or not Malazan was truly enjoyable, or if it was a lot of that feeling that was giving people this kind of high after they read the series, because everything that I had heard about it kind of made me wonder if that played a role in why people enjoy this so much. So that held me back, because I have to deal with a lot of complex things. I have to read a lot of complex things on a day-to-day basis. And so when I'm looking for fantasy fiction to read, I don't necessarily feel like I am lacking in that kind of supplementary material. But I was really curious, and finally I have read the first book. And I can say that I do think that this was a really enjoyable read, but I do also kind of get the appeal of Part B. So if you are a Malazan fan, and hopefully you will not find this question to be in any way rude, but I do think that there is a little bit of that. I think that we all like to feel that little rush of accomplishment when we finish something. So does that have anything to do with why you enjoy this series? And I wonder if that will continue to be my experience as I make my way through. But I finally read Gardens of the Moon. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. I thought that this was a very interesting book, and it felt very different from a lot of the fantasy that I have read up to this point. A couple of the other things that were holding me back from reading this is that you get a wide range of opinions on how dense it actually is. And I think that it's hard to judge that based on just this first entry, because I have heard pretty conclusively across the fan base that this is one of the weaker entries. But I will say that it was a lot less frustrating than I had expected it to be. I had expected to maybe not understand anything that was going on. I expected it to feel very dense. I was worried that that was going to make me pick through it really slowly. I felt like I was constantly on my guard as I was reading it, because in my mind I could just hear all of the people that I had heard talking about this book say, you know, you're going to miss details. Like, what if you don't get this? And so whenever characters were showing up on the page, I felt like I was cataloging them and their movements. And once I let go of that, it was a much better reading experience. I think this is maybe one of the stumbling points when people start Malazan for the first time, because I know I was primed to expect the worst. And so I took a very analytical approach to this book when I came in, and I don't know if that was the right call. I think that once I let go of that, once I got about 25% in, I was like, I am not taking notes as I'm reading this. I'm just going to read it. I'm going to enjoy my reading experience. And once I let go of all those things and I just let the story wash over me, I had a much better time. So I think that anticipatory anxiety of not knowing if you're going to understand the book might actually hold you back from enjoying the book. I think that it is complex in terms of how Steven Erikson frames the novel and the style with which he, I guess, tells the story, but it is not exceedingly complex. It is not so hard that you cannot follow what is going on. And I think if you let go of those assumptions, that you'll have a much better time when you get into the book, or at least that was the experience that I had. What I really did enjoy about this style is that for me at least, when I started Gardens of the Moon, and as I made my way through Gardens of the Moon, I realized that in terms of execution, this was very different from a lot of fantasy that I have read. I think we are all used, if we read a lot, we are all used to a very structured framework for our novels. We have an introduction, then we have the climbing action and the falling action, that framework that you learn in middle school when you're learning about the structure of a novel. We're all very used to that framework. And what Steven Erikson does in Gardens of the Moon is that he drops us into a story that is already in progress. And you could say, well, Sarah, all stories are already in progress because we're starting from someone's starting point. But I guess in this story, because this tells the story of an empire, and because it has such a wide cast of characters, we do not have a primary protagonist to follow. And so it genuinely feels like you are starting in the middle of a world. You are starting in the middle of many people's stories. It does not feel like you are getting this very clear-cut introduction. And I really like that. It took a little bit of time to adjust. And I think it takes a little bit of time to adjust to Steven Erikson's juxtaposition of this greater world. So you get this very kind of zoomed out view of an empire that is in the process of being built, but you also get this very intimate view of our main cast of characters. And it does take, I think, a little bit of time to adjust to that because it is a really interesting style. To me, this felt a lot like getting tossed onto the floor. So in medical school, you do 2 years in the classroom, then you do 2 years in the hospital. And this felt like, for me, those first days on the hospital where people assume that you know things. They know where they assume that you know where you need to be and how you're supposed to do your paperwork and who you're supposed to scurry along after, because ostensibly you've been given this framework in medical school. You know what to expect. You've been given some sort of expectation. But in reality, you have just been dropped into a situation that you are not prepared for, or you think you're not prepared for. But as soon as you get the rhythm, it all comes to you and you think, I do know how to do this. And the process of reading Gardens of the Moon felt very much like that to me. I felt like I was being dropped inside people's stories. I was not being spoon-fed any information. So I was not being told, this is character X. So far, this is what they have accomplished in their life. And now their goals are A, B, and C. No, you are very much thrown into the lives of these characters, and as the people around them learn about their motivations and their downfalls and their personalities, so you as the reader learns about their motivations and their downfalls and their personalities. There is very little internal examination of the characters' goals. There's very little internal examination of their thought process. And I really like that. One of the major things that pulls me out of any story is when we get this it's almost like a film of the characters' thoughts. We get this kind of running monologue of their thoughts because the author wants to let us know what they are thinking and why they are doing the things that they're doing. And I don't always like that because it pulls me out of the story, because in my real life, I am not able to read people's minds. And so it feels very jarring in a book when I have a character who's sitting in a chair thinking, yes, because I have always wanted to accomplish this, I will maneuver this person in this direction and then I will accomplish my goals. And it feels very like villainous and monologue-y, and I do not like it. And there's nothing like that in Gardens of the Moon. But we always get a little bit of that, and I think very capable authors can weave that into their story in a way that feels organic, even though we do not have that experience in real life. And I think, at least for me, that's what elevates a reading experience. But in Gardens of the Moon, we get almost none of that. We have to follow these characters to learn more about them. We have to see what they do on the page in order to understand them better. We have to watch how they interact with each other in order to understand what their values might be or what their personality traits might be. And I really, really enjoyed that. I think I have heard mixed opinions on the characterization in Malazan, and I think that this is probably one of the reasons why, is that Steven Erikson expects you as the reader to do some of the heavy lifting in terms of understanding how these characters work. And there's not going to be a lot of very exposition heavy paragraphs. There's not going to be a lot of really obvious world building. And that very much fits the style of writing that I enjoy. So I really, really like that. I think that I liked a lot of the characters, and I probably will talk at the very end of this video about a couple of the characters that I really liked, just in case people think that's a bit more spoilery. I'll put that at the end. But I liked the way that he drew these characters up. The writing in general I thought was very good. I thought it was crisp and clear. It was not overly poetic or flowery, but it was very smooth. I thought this was really easy to read stylistically. I think there's a lot happening, so there's lots of different there's lots of maneuvering. We are following a large cast of characters in various areas of this entire empire, so it does take a little bit of time to feel like you have a handle on all of the moving plot points. But in terms of just style of the language, this was not at all dense. I would say that it's much easier even than like a Lord of the Rings or like a Titus Groan, something like that, that more heavily formal, archaic feeling language. That is what I was expecting from this, but no, it's actually quite a modern writing style. And I thought that it was very easy to get through, and I have heard that the writing only gets better as the series goes on, so I am quite looking forward to that. Similarly, I really enjoyed the world building. I think that commenting on the world building at large is probably going to take me a little bit of time as I make my way through the series, as I continue to go on. But from what I have seen, the groundwork that I have seen in this book, I was very impressed. I know that Steven Erikson is I think he's an archaeologist, but I know that he works in like archaeology / anthropology. So I was expecting to feel this world as something very vivid and alive. And that is absolutely the experience that I had. I enjoyed seeing the subtle ways that he contrasted the cultures, looking at life from within a major city versus life within just the team of soldiers. I think that he did a really good job of showing us how people exist differently in different environments. Definitely, I expect that as the series goes on, we are going to find out a lot of details about the various cultures. Like there are different races, different groups of people that are mentioned, or we see kind of a small snapshot of a couple of characters from, who are from different races. And I thought that it made me excited. It made me intrigued about how he is going to build up on these different things. I think that we were given a very rich tapestry of places, of opinions, of characters, and I think that is only going to grow as the series continues. So Steven Erikson has given me much to look forward to in terms of world building. Another aspect of world building, I guess you would call it, this is kind of like a combination of world building and writing, but something that I always appreciate is when I think that the characters' names, the city names, the terms within the fantasy world, when they're all really well done, it always makes me happy, because it's something that sometimes can feel a little silly. Like there are definitely fantasy books where the names, I'm like, did this come from a random like fantasy name generator? Like where did these come from? But Steven Erikson, his naming conventions were phenomenal. I presume, and again, this is going to be one of the things that I have to learn as I go on, but if anybody is watching who is a longtime Malazan fan, then you can definitely fill me in on some of the inspiration. But I can imagine that a lot of these terms might be historical terms, terms borrowed from other languages, influences that Steven Erikson may have gathered from his professional life. Because they flow so well and they work well together that I can't imagine that it's all purely imagination. I mean, it could be. Steven Erikson seems like he has quite the imagination. So it's just something that I really appreciated, from just the general character names to the names of the cities to some of the terms to the terms used in the magic system. I really enjoyed all of that. And speaking of the magic system, I am very intrigued by it. I like this idea of the Warrens. This magic system felt soft in a way that it is kind of nebulous and difficult to understand. There seems definitely to be different gradients of power, and I am looking forward to learning more about who can access what type of power, whether or not there's going to be shifts in the magic system, how different people can use or manipulate that. But it is the type of magic that I tend to enjoy in my fantasy novels. I do not like very hard, very rule-based, circumscribed magic systems, so this definitely appealed to that part of fantasy that I really enjoy. And I do like it when gods and, I'm going to say humans, even though all of the people in the story are not human, but all the denizens of Earth, when they and the celestial beings, the gods, when they interact, I really enjoy that, and I imagine that that's just going to get more and more convoluted as this series goes on. But even just the ways in which the gods kind of manipulated events in this book, the ways in which they insinuated themselves into this bigger conflict, I imagine this is one of the areas where the series is really going to open up, and I really liked it. I enjoyed seeing it in this book. I enjoyed watching people's reactions, them trying to speculate on why certain gods would want to be involved and what it meant for them to be involved and how that was going to affect what was happening in the human world. So those are all things that I really like about the series and things that I like to read about. So I'm looking forward to seeing that more as I go on. Similarly, I'm looking forward to the thematic exploration. Most people that I have heard talk about Malazan talk about how strong the themes are and how this is less of an enjoyable experience in terms of just straightforward plotting and more for the thematic exploration. I will say, I love plot-driven fantasy as much as the next person. Sometimes if all I am getting is thematic exploration, I can feel like that is a bit much. It's a bit stuffy. So we'll see how Erikson balances this in the future. I thought that the balance of plot to character development to thematic development was pretty good in this book. And I enjoyed the themes that were explored. I liked exploring the idea of collectivism versus kind of individualism. I liked that existential exploration, why are we here? What is the purpose? Are we here to gain power while we can and live life to the fullest? Are we here to establish connections with other people? Are we here to stand for something, or is all of this meaningless? I'm looking forward to seeing more of those types of ideas explored. One thing that I hear Joanna and Philip talk about a lot is the exploration of the idea of compassion in the Malazan series. And this is something that, again, I presume I'm going to see much more of in the future. But I was interested to see that Steven Erikson, despite kind of the sprawling nature of this book and the various intricacies of the plot, it was evident to me, even from this one novel, that the impact of a single action from a single character can reverberate across an entire empire. And a moment of compassion, which we see, especially near the end of this novel, we see people intervening with acts of compassion that they, are not required to make, and we see how that impacts the plot at large. So it'll be nice to follow that throughout the series and watch how Erikson continues to explore how the acts of a single person or of a few can have these huge repercussions on the greater world. So there's lots to enjoy here. I thought that a lot of the things that I was expecting to get out of this book, I did get. I thought that it was definitely a unique approach to fantasy. I think structurally it felt very different from a lot of the standard fantasy stories that I read. I think that it is definitely a book that does not follow a generic narrative setup. And I think that that is going to be okay for some readers. And I think some people are just not going to like it. And I don't think that has anything to do with how well you can critically analyze a book. It certainly has no bearing on how smart you are. It just comes down to personal preference. I like feeling a little lost sometimes. I like feeling like I'm working a little bit. Some people don't want to feel like they're working at all when they're reading, and that's fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. But I did like that. I think it means that I will have to be in the right mood to pick up one of these books, and I think that it means I'm probably going to have to take a little more time. There's not going to be any skim reading when I'm going through Malazan, I'm sure, but I'm really excited for it. I think the characterization was stronger than I was expecting. These expectations were obviously just from, hearing people's opinions online. So it's not like they were founded in anything reasonable. It was just, bits and pieces that I was taking from different people. But I was pleasantly surprised by how vibrant the characters felt and how attached to them I felt by the end of the story. Like I said, I enjoyed the writing. It was far less dense than I thought it was going to be. And even though the plot was certainly convoluted, I enjoyed watching the way that it all came together. If anything, that final act of Gardens of the Moon was the thing that felt the most kind of stereotypically fantasy to me, because it is this kind of grand culmination of events. Things start happening very quickly. It is it does have this kind of explosive ending that we come to expect from a lot of epic fantasy. So that felt very familiar, and I did really enjoy that part of it. But those are kind of my spoiler-free thoughts. This was a very vague exploration of Gardens of the Moon, and that is what I intended it to be. This is just me trying to give people who have not yet started the series some idea of what you might be able to expect. And like I said, this will definitely shift as I continue to review the books moving forward, because I do want to pay more attention to the building plot threads, to the thematic exploration. But for Gardens of the Moon, I think this is a book that intimidates a lot of people. So I just wanted to give a very straightforward synopsis of the things that I enjoyed, the things that I expected to get, and that came through for me. As a very brief spoilery section, I just want to talk about some of the characters that I really enjoyed. So like I said, I felt far more attached to these characters than I expected to. I really liked following them. And I think maybe this leads to another difficulty with the Malazan series, is that I know book 2 does not follow these characters. So I think it says something that people become really attached to them. And it is sad that you don't get to follow them immediately afterward, but I think some of them do come back, or maybe kind of like weave in and out. So I'm looking forward to seeing them further along down the line. But for me, I really liked Whiskey Jack. He was a character that I found it was very easy to get attached to. I like that kind of character archetype. I really liked Sori and that whole subplot. And I think it's probably because this weaves in that idea of the gods meddling in people's affairs. Seeing her be taken over by this presence and then having to live with the aftermath. And I thought a lot of the exploration of her losing her memories and whether or not it's better to forget those kind of atrocious things that you do and kind of live in ignorance, or is it better to know what you have been doing for the past, several years and have that knowledge. That is interesting on its own, but I thought that she was a really compelling character. I really liked Animander Rake. I know we didn't get a ton of him in this book, but the name, that is an excellent name, perfect name, A+ naming conventions there. But I really hope that we are going to see more of him throughout the series, because I think that he is just the coolest character. So one of my friends who's read this was like, there's going to be characters who are way more epic than Animander. I'm like, how? Where else do we have to go from here? Where else can we go but up? But he was a character that I really, really enjoyed. And I feel like I have to comment on Krupp. because I had a visceral reaction to Krupp when he first appeared on the page. So much so that I sent a Voxer message to Alan. I was like, Alan, do I have to sit through an entire series of books where this man talks to himself in the third person? Because I will lose my mind. And totally against my will. So like, I need an apology, Steven Erikson, please, because totally against everything that I wanted, I found myself becoming attached to him. And like, I'm embarrassed for myself because like, I did not want to like him, but just, you know, as you would expect from someone who is the eel, like he definitely used that kind of like slippery charm to slide his way into my begrudging affection. But it's just, I feel so, it's where I'm getting overexcited, but like, I feel played because I feel like Steven, like of everyone in this book, Steven Erikson really wants you to like Krupp, and he is doing everything in his path to be like, you know what? I'm gonna make you fall in love with this character. And I did not want to. And I still don't know that I love Krupp. Like, he is not my favorite, but like by the last page, I was like, well, like, God damn it. Like, I did not want to like you. And now I do. And now I want to see you. I want you to be in all the books. I want to follow you and find out what you're doing. So I'm not happy about it, but I think for now I am, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to take it, Team Krupp. So I apologize if Alan watches this video, because when I sent him a message, I was like starkly anti-Krupp. So we'll see how that changes. Like, he won me over in this book, but will that continue as the series continues to go on? I'm not sure. But you know what? We will let it unfold. We will see how all of these events come to pass. But I'm not going to comment on a lot of plot related things here. Like I said, I didn't take any notes during Gardens of the Moon. I let go of all of those parts of the reading experience, and I just wanted to let myself enjoy it. And I really did. I gave this one 4 stars because I think that there is going to be a lot of room for expansion of the world and for me to even fall further in love with these characters. I don't know if this will become a favorite fantasy series for me. Like I said, I do enjoy a good plot-driven fantasy. There are things about fantasy that I really like that I probably won't get a lot of in this series, but I am willing to see where it takes me. I am going to aim for reading one of these books every 2 months, and the last thing that I want to do is try to push myself to read it really quickly. If I am enjoying it and feel like I need to pick up the next book automatically, then I will do that. I tend to have a fairly good memory in terms of remembering plot points and things, so I don't think that I will need to read them back to back to back. But this is one of the reasons why I probably will get more detailed in terms of future reviews, because if it does take me a little bit to go from book to book, it would be nice to have those to look back on. But if you are here and you have made it to the end of this video, then thank you. If you have been putting off reading Gardens of the Moon for some of the reasons that I talked about, I do think that overall it is not as intimidating as we believe it is. I think that if you let go of a lot of those assumptions about the series, that it will be a more enjoyable reading experience. And I think that it is something that you should give a try for yourself. So please let me know if you are planning on picking it up. If you are a longtime Malazan fan, then please feel free to tell me like what your favorite one in the series is, what you think I should be looking forward to. If you know about where Steven Erikson gets some of his naming conventions and some of his inspiration, then I would love to hear any of those things. Just no spoilers. That is the only thing that I ask. And I will see you with another video soon. Bye!